let's talk about Iran. I really want to just listen to you 2.
But definitely, I think that this is the shittier version of Iraq 2.0 because at least back in the day, they had to like actually, go and posture and try to manufacture consent from the public. And I mean, they're out there doing, weapons of mass destruction with nuclear weapons. So I guess it's like ish, but it's kind of insulting. I wish they would try to sell it a little bit better. I'm not gonna buy it, but I wish they would try to sell it a little better. Um, but it's definitely, if not a full regime change, it is definitely the Kissinger way to shake the snow globe and just to destabilize it for the purpose of normalizing economic relations with Israel, which is really what the Board of Peace is supposed to do also. It's just
Hey,
meant.
and I want to say one thing real quick about the Kissinger snow globe thing. My grandpa told me one time when he heard that is that when you shake up a snow globe, you create a blizzard. So go on.
Mhm. Yeah, and exactly. And that's what they wanna do. They just wanna create a blizzard to make it so that I mean, we're talking about potentially having civil war in Iran now because there is a power vacuum and you really only decapitated the leadership. You didn't, just like in Venezuela, you plucked the leader out of it, but you didn't take out the whole apparatus. The whole framework is still there. The Islamic Republic did not fall. And I think that Americans are very short-sighted and don't know much about Iran, but there are three, I believe three, successors that he had already lined up. He knew that Israel wanted to take down this leadership. They've known since like the 50s when we did this. I mean, the Iranians overthrew their leader and the Shah originally, and they democratically elected Mohammad Mossadegh in the 50s. And he made the fatal mistake of nationalizing the British petroleum. And the Brits obviously didn't fucking like that. So here we go with a regime change war with MI6 and the CIA, and to the benefit of Israel at that point, because we wanted to install the Shah again. And so we tried to do that. It was horrible. And then we have the Iranian Revolution in 1970s, where now they've taken down the Shah and they've installed a fundamentalist, extremist government. And so when you do that and then you decapitate the leadership of that, you're not creating a power vacuum like we did with the Iranian Revolution. You're not going to get a democratically elected thing happening after you violently take out the leader. We are now we're going to see somebody else assume that position. And we're just going to keep going with this. The best case scenario that Israel or the United States really could get out of this is that Iran is just so fucked up internally that they are trying to scramble, different factions are trying to assume leadership, that it just becomes an all-out civil war, much like you saw in other states and like Syria. And I think they're still struggling for leadership, even though Shara is the head right now. They're still trying to get factions in Syria underneath this government because it's not a clean transition. You have to get people to agree with you. You have to get people to decide, yes, I like this guy enough that we'll keep him in. And I think that I believe Pahlavi Shah is who they want now. This man has been sitting in California, I mean, for 50 years. He has not been in Iran for most of his life. He has no coalition, he has no support, no one knows him. He is like the Bo Bai of Iran. Like, we don't know her. She doesn't even go here. So it's a disaster, and it will be a disaster. Any person that gets installed by the United States or Israel is obviously going to become a rallying cry for the Iranians to rally around occupation, because anytime you have an occupying force, you will always have peoples that you rebel against that. And so this is a bad idea. This is going to cost so much American blood and treasure, and all for what? So that we can destabilize Iran? Like, I'm not, the cost benefit analysis here is only to the benefit of Israel. Like, I'm not seeing the American benefit here. And no one in the administration is willing to sell that to us. And I find it deeply concerning that Hakeem Jeffries is posturing and saying, yes, we will take a vote on Ro Khanna and Thomas Massey's war powers resolution. Which, side note, I am so shocked by Thomas Massey. Like, I don't agree with him on a lot of things, but I agree with him on some
Right.
things. And like, that's so shocking. Way to go for him. But to watch Hakeem Jeffries just posture and be like, "Sure, we'll take a vote on that," but I he also said, "I agree that we need to take military and decisive actions against Iran. We should also ask for consent and authorization." So, really, what you're saying is the typical establishment Democrat thing. You don't actually care about progress, you care about procedure. And so, you're not incensed that we are going to spend American blood and treasure in another senseless forever war that 80% of Americans do not fucking want. You're actually more mad that the Trump administration just did this unilaterally and didn't ask you for permission, which then makes me think, are you really that mad, Hakeem? Like, are you really that mad that Trump did that? Because now it looks bad on Trump. He looks like a dictator asshole, and you get to come over here and posture and go, "That's unconstitutional. You should have asked permission." Because I almost guarantee if he had gone to Congress and asked permission, we'd see just like we saw with the Iraq War, where everyone lines up and says yes. And why do they say yes? Because they take money from the pro Israel lobby, and Israel said, "Yes, we want you to do this." And so the pro Israel lobby said, "Okay, here's money, go do this." And they went, "Yep, I like that. Okay." And then they do it. And you have like two Democrats who don't vote for the thing. And then 20 years later, we'll all turn around and go, "Holy shit, we spent like 3, 4, 5 trillion dollars, lost thousands of American lives, and caused a refugee crisis from 92 million people. This is insane. Who could have known?" It's like,
I think
could have
there are
known.
two things there that I think are important that, for whatever reason, I think that it's simple, but our legislators do not. A, no one is asking the Iranian people what they want. Like, that's their country, much like with Gaza. No one's asking the Palestinians what they want. So,
It's not about that.
exactly.
It's
But
not
I
about
think
that.
it's important
Yeah.
to say, and I think that's why it's important to get legislators in there that will say those things, right? And after that, speak to the soldiers. There's a reason why we have so many soldiers that come back from war that then become anti war because they were there, because they saw it. Half of these guys come home with PTSD, like, maybe they have some sort of, like, chemical exposure that then causes all kinds of medical problems for them, and oftentimes, we don't even wanna treat them. Like, right now, like, we're taking funding away from the VA, yet these are the same people that we're gonna be sending into battle, right? And third thing is, of the very rich people that always start this stuff, they never have any skin in the game, they take all the profit, they don't send their sons and daughters. None of these sitting legislators right now, I guess I shouldn't say none. We will see. I would bet 95% of them are not going to send any of their sons and daughters. None of them are going to go themselves. We cannot continue to keep doing this. This is a broken model. If you want to think of the US as a corporation, which many of us, like many of people do now, like this big war machine, because by the nature of the things that we invest in, we are clearly very pro war, pro military. Because
Always
people are
have
make
been.
Yeah, because people are making money from these things, right?
Mhm.
I think it's good to just say it out loud that if the American people are basically anti-war, if the military members, the retired ones especially, are generally anti-war, we can't fund our services here, yet, I mean, what's the number now? 7? Have we started like 7 different mini wars or you know, the insanity of it is these ultra rich people playing Battleship like 5-year-olds at the expense of the rest of us. And these poor Iranian people, my God, are they suffering right now? But at the end of the day, I just think it's important to say the Board of Peace, two of the main members, right, who are like, yeah, this sounded like a good idea, but now we want to go to war. I mean, that's just insanity. Regardless of like all the money invested and like all the ways that Americans are going to lose here. But just those optics alone that I think people need to focus on is like, right, our president wanted to start a board of peace with warlords who now are doing war in lots of places.
The countries that I'm not as educated on this as Sierra is, but, the countries that are in, the Board of Peace, how many of them are actual, enemies of Iran? And do you think that Well, I think there's a connection, but what kind of a connection do you think the Board of Peace has with all of this? I mean, you've got we know Israel, but I don't know like Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Qatar and Bahrain and Jordan and Kuwait, or Turkey, Egypt, Kazakhstan. Are these countries that are allies of Iran, or are they enemies, or is that something that is not in relevance or?
It's hard because some of these countries, so when I was looking at the list of people, I thought it was interesting because Israel is not allied or is and isn't with like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Jordan, Kuwait, and I think Egypt. But it's interesting because Egypt and Israel have a lot of problems. Obviously, some people old enough to remember like the 6 Day War in like
Mhm,
1967,
mhm.
where is Egypt and Syria attack Israel. Israel attacks Syria and Egypt. Mm. Anyway, the point being, these are interesting and fraught relationships, mostly because Israel needs these countries to recognize them economically. If they like Saudi Arabia, when Israel and Saudi Arabia have economic relationships, this legitimizes Israel on the world stage. It makes it harder for Saudi Arabia to then turn around and be like, okay, well, you're not doing right by the Palestinians. We need to hold you accountable. We need to, the same way that the US doesn't with Saudi Arabia because we have all these economic ties, because we, deal in weapons with them and we sell them, we do arms deals with them that are very lucrative. So we turn a blind eye when, Mohammed bin Salman hacks a bone saw to Jamal Khashoggi. Or we turn a blind eye when Saudi Arabia is funding terrorism in various theaters around the world. Um, these relationships are fraught, and I don't know that Iran necessarily has relationships and allies with these countries, but I don't know that it's outwardly necessarily adversarial in the way that like Israel is very much. If you read like Haaretz or the Jerusalem Post or Times of Israel, if you read Israeli media right now, they are not just doing anti-Iran propaganda. They're also doing anti-Turkish propaganda. So it makes me start to wonder then, are they going to try to posture us into a war with Turkey, who is a NATO ally? Because like it is interesting to me that they are two-faced in that they are sitting on the board of peace with Turkey and talking about how dangerous Turkey is. They think that Erdogan is so dangerous that we actually need to help the Turkish people get out from under that dictatorship. And so it makes me wonder, is this board of peace really about, obviously it's not about peace, but like what is this really about? Is this just about taking over and doing the Kissinger shaking the globe and just shaking it all up and making it so that we have Israeli hegemony in the region? Because that's honestly just what it looks like Israel is posturing to do, is the Greater Israel Project that they have brought maps to the UN for, decades at this point, showing. And Mike Huckabee just did the US ambassador to Israel just gave an interview with Tucker Carlson where he literally said from the Nile River to the Euphrates, we're just going to take the whole fucking Middle East, and caused an
Yeah.
international scandal with that. And so
And
it
Tucker
makes.
Carlson's son also works at the White House.
I know, right? It is crazy to think how, all of these people connect. Yes, because we are a colony and a nation. Like we don't operate in the same world that these people operate in. My mom is a huge
Mm-mm.
sci-fi fan, really quickly. She's a huge sci-fi fan. Her favorite thing to say is what we need is an alien invasion so that all of humanity can get together and fight the alien invaders and we'll all kumbaya it out. And I just laugh because I'm like, Mom, I love you. We are literally invaded by a 1% alien population that operates and thinks different than us and speak in different languages. They move differently than us. And they're called billionaires and we don't do anything
Yeah.
about it. I mean,
But
not
this
Yeah.
is why it's important to have these conversations, right? And I was actually going to comment on, um, I have been coming across some media recently. And the reason I say this is I think it's an interesting point. And I want people to just go research on their own, right? Like I spent a good portion of time in South Africa. Um, I was married to someone that was South African. So I got a little introduction into apartheid. And when you go there, it's very different. You get a very different education. You now are having Israelis from an Israeli perspective talking on camera about living in an apartheid state. So if you then factor these type of thought processes into the larger, like I said, zoom out again into the larger argument, and then also recognize that we have two people with a lot of influence, Peter Thiel and Elon Musk, who come from that system, who have very strong ties to Israel as well. I think people should start peeling back these layers into how these apartheid systems functioned, and that might give better insight into what may lie ahead with some of these bigger partnerships, and then what they may be planning for Iran or Turkey or what have you.
Absolutely, because apartheid is just a tool for colonialism or colonization, and that's really what this Board of Peace is. It is just entrenching colonial powers, and it is taking agency away from Palestinians and saying that the British, the French, the Americans, the whomever the fuck wants to come to the table this time gets to decide the fate of Gazans and Palestinians. And it has been that way since the beginning of this conflict. And it is so fucking insulting to hear people constantly be like, well, why didn't you take the deal? Why didn't you take the Sykes-Picot Agreement? Why didn't you take the Balfour Declaration? Why didn't you take the Oslo Accords or Camp David Accords? Like, why didn't you take these deals? You're like, because time and time again, you left us out of the fucking negotiating table. You told us we couldn't even come in the room. We had no say. So like you gave us shitty ass deals that even like at the zenith of peace talks, the Oslo Accords, everyone says these are great. How do we get back to this? People want to know, how do we get back to that moment? You fucking don't. If we're a genocide later, you're not going to. But also recognizing that even the Israeli negotiators now, today, will tell you that back then, that was a shit deal. They knew it was a shit deal. They were literally offering Palestinians 20% of the West Bank and a sliver of Gaza, when actually what was supposed to be offered was the entirety of the West Bank. But instead, they did this weird area thing where they said, Palestinians, you can have authority and control over Area A, which ends up to be like 15 to 18% of the West Bank. It's not even contiguous. It's all scattered. And in that scattering is Area B, which will be, I believe Jerusalem is in Area B. And it is going to be a UN thing. We're going to have peacekeepers in there, and it'll be something where everyone can live. Israel gets sovereignty over Israeli citizens. The Palestinian Authority gets a sovereignty over the Palestinian Jews, or Arabs, sorry, because Palestinians can also be Jewish, right? I think people forget that. But over the Palestinians, there's like 2% at this point in Jerusalem. So 18 and 2, you're giving 20% of the West Bank. And then Area C gets to be under Israeli control, and that is 80% of the West Bank. And it gets to be more contiguous. So essentially, you're asking the Palestinians to create a state out of like 10% of what was originally theirs, and telling them it can't even be a contiguous state. How would you do that? That would be like breaking up the United States and being like, okay, well, you can have Washington and Iowa and Florida. That's the United States. Everything else land back to whomever owned it before, the Native Americans. We'll give it back to them. Okay, well, is that a
Well,
viable country? That's not viable. What am I
no, I mean, people could. Let me throw this out there to try to get people to relate about what would happen if today we had a civil war break out in the United States. It would not be like the Civil War of 1861. That was a territorial divide. That the South was pro-slave and the North was basically not, because that's what it all ended up being about. Okay, that wouldn't be the case here today. Okay, if a civil war broke out, so we would have pockets of, you know, I mean, here in the Midwest, what would we have? Illinois, I mean, Minnesota. I mean, we would have sectors of the country that were for one side and sectors of another. We would be surrounded or being heavily within the far right,
and nobody wants that,
belief
right?
system.
Right, and
No.
there's
So
people in
that's
cities
kind of
around
what
like that.
the situation is over there
Exactly.
because you're taking this little sector and saying, "Here, you stay right there, and then we're going to surround you
Yep.
with,
And
Well,
no
let me
control
just
of your land,
inject.
no control of your movements, no control of the water, no control of anything. The Israeli government gets to control your water usage. They get to control your movements in and out of this restricted area that is essentially like West Bank and Gaza are essentially open air concentration camps and have been called such by so many NGOs, including Bet Salam, the Israeli NGO. It's like saying that, like, the people in the Warsaw Ghetto had some kinda life and agency. Like, do they really, though, when the Nazis get to control their movements, when the Nazis control their water? I mean, these Israeli settlers, not all of them, because not everyone is, they're not a monolith, but the majority of the people who do the illegal Israeli settlements are crazy people who are fundamentalists in their religion, and they come and they terrorize people. I was just watching an AP news report where they were showing that a 71-year-old Palestinian woman had been bludgeoned by a settler. And I'm just like watching her on the ground, just bloody under an olive tree. All she did was come to her land to harvest olives, to check on her trees, whatever the fuck she's doing in her own land. And she gets bludgeoned by a settler. And then a 51-year-old man comes to her aid, sees her and tries to give aid. And the Israeli then bludgeons them. And so now you have two people headed to the hospital over a settler because that settler felt like, well, you're on my land. So I'm going to bludgeon you with a rock because you are now on my land. But you're not. They're not on their land. But these
well,
settlers
you know that this
have the
this
right to
plan,
do
their
it.
end game would be to totally obliterate the existence of the Palestinian people,
Right.
period.
I mean, exactly. And they're doing that by injecting cholera and stuff into their water. They're giving them food that has been contaminated, that is molded, that has all kinds of contaminants in them purposefully and to exterminate the Palestinians in the most sadistic fucking way that just like it makes me sick and angry
It's
to
it's
know that
it's
like
like creating a huge gas chamber that they can control,
yes.
that they can
And it makes me so sad
they
to know that
know.
these people
Yeah.
know, like the Jewish people know in their but that's why you see the Jewish voices for peace because they're like, we know in our bones what this shit is. We know what this is like. It eats out the substance of your soul to know that there are people that want to do this to you and that the world looks on and doesn't care. Like it just it breaks you down. And to know that there are children in Palestine who, if you talk to them, their biggest dream is just to make it to 16. They just pray that they will live to 16. They pray that they will have a life because most of them, when you talk to the adults, they're like, yeah, I'm just a walking zombie. I don't know what my life will look like. I have no economic opportunities. I have nothing. And I'm just praying that one day people care enough that this shit will end for me.
Yeah. Well, isn't it all about making sure that prophecy is uh, followed through? I mean, isn't that what the belief
Oh, yeah,
is here?
the
That this is
Christian
all about,
belief. Yeah.
yeah,
It starts with the D. I can't remember what somebody called it because I never learned this as I was Catholic and my mom's a Jehovah's Witness.
yeah, I was too.
So
Yeah.
I don't really know,
But I
but
know that's what Huckabee
we do
believes.
believe. The evangelicals specifically believe. That's why American evangelicals are the largest cohorts of Zionists
Mike
in
Mike
America. It's not
Johnson and the
even the
Huckabees
Jewish
of the world.
people,
Yeah.
right? It's the
Right.
Christian evangelicals because they truly believe in the second coming of Christ. They believe that if all of the Jews, it's a racist ass theory, that if all of the Jews go to Israel and the Dome of the Rock, the Al Aqsa Mosque, is destroyed, that will be the site of the second coming of Christ. Christ will then come and clean the earth of all these Jews and Muslims skirmish the earth, all the scum, and all of us atheists will also be taken out. And yeah, Christ can come again. And the Catholics are so upset by that and incensed by that because they're like, the fuck do you mean? Christ already came. Are you saying God's not good enough? Are you saying Jesus was he came once already? He's not coming again. And so that's why sometimes you see this divide where Catholics also are like, yeah, we're anti-Zionist. What the fuck do you mean? That's antithetical to what we believe. We don't think that the Jews are going to be slaughtered at the Dome of the Rock and that's going to bring the second coming of Christ. You guys are insane.
Can we take this back a little farther though?
Mhm.
Because
Where you want to go?
I think that so this is just how my brain
For 10
works.
minutes. Sorry.
For 10 minutes. I won't even take 10 minutes. But
Okay.
if you think about the type of people, right, that are having these type of mindsets, And then you go back into American history and you go all the way back to what we did as a country to the Native Americans, or you go back to what we did with slavery. It doesn't take like a huge, leap to then see these people for what they are and be like, oh, right. So, like, all brown people are bad. You guys are white. You want to maintain this fake whiteness bullshit. And you're okay with just exterminating a bunch of people. Now, we already did that a couple times. And now we're projecting that in other places around the world, right? And I think sometimes maybe it is important to have those conversations about history, right? Because people can kind of get lost in the weeds. Maybe, they don't have any expertise. Maybe they don't know anybody from the Middle East and it's just hard for them. So let's give them that element of US history, for example, because I think you still have a lot of people here that would, whether it's true or whether it's not, right, that would claim some sort of Native American ancestry or can at least conceptualize, like, right, what we did then was really messed up. I mean, they're still digging kids out of the ground around these different Indian schools. So maybe that's a good like focal point to give people in the US of like, right, you may not necessarily understand what's going on in Gaza. You may not necessarily understand what's going on in Iran, but I think you can kind of at least understand a bit more about what happened to the Native Americans here. And maybe now you can infuse that into world politics and see things a bit more clearly.
I mean, when you look at the genocide of the indigenous population in America, the numbers of how many there originally were are estimates because that kind of shit just wasn't done. But I've read anywhere from 40 to 60 million indigenous Americans once occupied this land before any settlers came abroad. And by the early 1900s, it was reduced to 800 and some thousand. So just in a period of a couple hundred years, and I know that seems like a lifetime to people, and it is a long time, but this is what happens when power and wealth and ideology become part of the system. Um, it can be a slow process, it can be a quick process, but total annihilation and elimination is the end game, and that's what makes it so sickening. And I don't think there's very few Americans that do not have some kind of indigenous blood within us. There's very few Americans that do not have Black African blood within us. We have to remember, especially in the South, these slave owners, they bred children through their slaves. Okay. That's what they did.
They had to, because that's
So
where they outlawed the slave trade, so chattel slavery became the big boon. You had to, I mean,
ex-
I
none of
mean,
that's
exactly.
acceptable, but
Exactly.
sometimes when you
It was
say
a
things like
baby
that.
factory.
Right, sometimes when you
Yeah.
say things like that, people are like, "No, don't be so awful," and you're like, "No, really, they would. They would
No,
take their best
it's,
female slave and their best male
yeah.
slave, and sometimes if it wasn't the slave owner, raping the poor slave enslaved person, sometimes they would pick the 2 best enslaved people and force them to have sex with each other against their will, and, like, you can read where there are men who give or not testimonies, but, like, their experiences and say that, like, it's awful, it's inhumane, and it's, like, a fate worse than death because you have to do this, and otherwise both of you could be hurt or killed, and so it's like you're trying in your brain to protect this other female and do this to her, and so, like, it's horrid, the horrors of slavery.
And we're supposed to think that all of these slave masters weren't raping the black
Right,
women.
right.
I mean,
Thomas
are you
Jefferson, Sally
serious?
Hemings. Oh,
Yeah, but I'm just saying, or what do you call the slave handlers? The dudes that took them out to the field and made sure they worked. You tell me that they weren't taking. I mean, the ignorancy of people is just astounding. Sometimes that they
well,
think that this is not something that occurred on a regular basis.
speaking truth and not telling our children history, right? Because for far too long in the States, just as an example, we omitted too many things. And then you had to go seek it out yourself. Maybe you had an interest in it. Maybe you had some family connection, right? And this is what's important worldwide, right? Like we have to, as the United States, as a very mixed culture base, right? We have to then send people out into the world as representatives of that. And we're not doing that. So, how can we ever expect diplomacy from these people if they're still in that old mindset of European expansion, colonialism, whatever? It's so important for us to tell the truth right now because we can't have like realistic, like, come to Jesus talks about other countries if we can't do it for ourselves.
So I don't know about YouTube. I think this is a good spot where we end our pod and we come back with more of this story where we dive deep into not only the border peace, but also Iran. So we want to thank you for joining this podcast, and we hope that you become a subscriber, follow our content, follow our channel, leave us a comment and a like, and tell your family and friends about us because we are talking about issues that affect every single one of us. We are three Hoosiers who come from very different backgrounds, yet we are in many ways the same. We live in three different areas of the state, yet we are neighbors in every way. Our paths would never have crossed if it were not for the current political scene, not only here in Indiana, but across our country and around the world. Our beliefs and our purpose have united our voices. Our conviction and vigor have brought us together, fighting for democracy and fighting against tyranny. We will confront a variety of topics head on, from Indiana to Gaza. We will not hold back to seek the truth, to find the answers, to expose the lies, and to make it make sense.